Good evening, everyone. On the workbench today, I've got a PS4 controller that you'll kind of notice is partly opening up here in the back and all of the screws are gone. I did not do that. I bought this as broken and we're going to see if we can go ahead and try and get this fixed. I don't know what's wrong with it. I tried to connect it to my computer to see if it had any like stick drift or any of the buttons weren't working or anything like that, but it doesn't power on at all. And it doesn't take any current. If I try and plug it in to my little ammeter here, we'll see that it doesn't draw any power. 5.27 volts and 0 amps. So it doesn't draw any power. So I'm going to guess that it's probably going to be something simple like stick drift, or a button wasn't working and the previous person opened it up and didn't really know what they were doing. And the ribbon cable that connects the micro USB daughter board to the main board is not really connected, or it's broken. So they've already broken the clips, latches back here, but the ones in the center feel okay. I'm just going to slightly pull it apart using my fingers, my hands, and then I'm going to wedge my smudger down here while pushing down towards the bottom. That'll separate it. Keeping pressure, there it goes. And the L2 and R2 fell out. But yet, as you can see, ribbon cable is not connected. And it looks like one of the little traces there is already starting to separate. There you go, you can see it falling off. So no longer attached. So not really a good ribbon cable to use anymore. Let's pull these L2 and R2s out. Woohoo! Flying, and I lost the spring. That's okay. Oh, there it is. Oh no, super tiny. Let me get something magnetic. Well, I tried to pick it up. There it is. There we go, and the spring. And this one over here, R2, just push it in. So it doesn't have a spring. Pull out the battery, the LiPo cell, battery holder. Oh, zoom back out. There we go. Little latch on the side, pull that off. Look at that. Don't know what happened. Was that for me? I don't think that was for me. It just came undone completely. All right, let's start by taking off the little holder here to get that micro USB board out. Just 2 screws. There's a bunch of different models of PS4 controllers. This model, I think this is like one of the originals, is the only one that has 2 screws that hold down these little clamp pieces right here. And then lift up the diffuser while pulling on the foam, because I want to rip it. Don't want to rip the foam. And I'm going to completely take it apart anyway, because this is going to get washed. I like to clean all of my PS4 controllers, really all of my controllers that I get that I fix. If you look at the controller here, down on the edge, you can see that brown, whitish, dirt kind of stuff. That is dead skin and sweat. So very disgusting. And I just like to throw it in a nice big tub of hot water with a bunch of soap. Give it a nice good scrub down. That way, it gets nice and clean. I have plenty of micro USB port boards. I'm gonna grab a ribbon cable for this one and just want to plug it into the computer and see what it's doing before we start troubleshooting it. Because the broken ribbon cable is probably not the reason why the previous owner opened this. So let's take a break real quick. I'm gonna connect this over to my computer and we'll see if we're getting some drift or something. All right, well, my computer was being stupid and not letting me really record through it. I kept getting a bunch of static on my microphone. And the microphone works. I'm using the same exact microphone on this camera to record that I did on my computer. So anyways, I got it hooked up to the computer, did a little test on the analog sticks, and they worked perfectly fine. There's no drift on them at all. All the buttons work. They tested out just fine. The touchpad button, the PlayStation, option share, face buttons, all of them were okay, as well as the triggers. And I'm not really sure why the previous person opened this up and what they're trying to do or fix. I'm not sure. Maybe the micro USB port was not working or it's not charging. So the only other thing that I'm going to do now to test is make sure that it does charge the LiPo. So we'll just connect the battery back into place, and my ribbon cable, we'll put this back in there. And we just want to check and make sure that it's actually going to charge, because it does connect to the computer, but connecting to the computer doesn't need 5 volts. Well, yeah, it does really need 5 volts, but it can be kind of an iffy connection with the computer and work perfectly fine, and then I'll try and charge a controller and it doesn't really charge properly. So I just got that plugged in. You can see the little light glowing. Let me turn this off. There you go. As you can see the orangish light pulsing there, so it's charging, as well as 5.5 volts at 110 milliamp hours. So it's charging the cell perfectly fine. The controller powers up and it connects to the computer, no problem. All the buttons are okay. So I'm not quite sure what they opened this for. Maybe it was from one of the trigger buttons. Which one was it? I think R2 didn't have the spring, this thing right here. And you probably can't see it. The little spring that goes in the trigger buttons. So maybe that fell out. When I opened this up, this one was flipped all the way down too. It wasn't from me, I don't think, but I'm not really sure. Yeah, I don't really know why they opened it, but I do know it's working perfectly fine. No buttons, issues, anything like that. So I'm just going to fully disassemble this and throw it in my soapy water, give it a nice scrub, clean it up, and we'll come back when it's time to put it back together. All right, got the controller all cleaned up and looking good. Just take a quick look around there. Got all that gunk out of it, so it's pretty good now. The touchpad, it's usually not too bad. If anything, yeah, sometimes you'll get some gunk around the little lip there. So easy way to deal with that, just grab a little cotton bud, Q-tip, whatever you want to call it, some isopropyl alcohol. If it'll come out, there we go. Just take that and just run it around the edge. What's interesting about this though is sometimes you'll get some sticky stuff in there from like someone spilling some cola or soda, Mountain Dew for the win, and just gets it on there. Sticky stuff is not really dissolvable or clean. It doesn't really clean up too well with isopropyl, but if it's just like sweat and dust and stuff like that, perfectly fine. And there we go. And we'll just put the options and share button in. Just slides right back in there, no big deal. And the PlayStation button with its rubber membrane. The touchpad. Oops. Touchpad. Now, like I said, I don't really know why they took this apart, what the issue was. I did pull out a new spring because the R2 button was missing it. And something I did notice, I don't know how well it'll show up on camera, just because of how small these are. But I've got the springs right here. If you take a look, the one on the bottom that I'm pointing to, this is what was in the controller on the L2 button. The one on the top is a brand new one. You can see that the original one is very, very bent back into place. The way this works is whenever you pull the trigger, the L2 and R2 button, whenever you pull it, the spring compresses. And then in order for it to bounce back to its original start position, it decompresses. So you can see how much of a difference it is compared to a new one. That's quite a degrees length difference on the bin there. So it could have been maybe they took it apart because the L2 and R2 buttons weren't working too well. They weren't bouncing back into place. Maybe they didn't feel tight enough. I'm not really sure. The only way I'll ever find out is if I like contact the person that sold it to me, and I don't really see a point in doing that. So what we'll do next is we need some new thumb sticks. You can get some replacement thumbsticks off of like AliExpress and eBay, fairly cheap. There you go. I think I paid like 10 bucks for 50 of these, and they're pretty good quality. They're not, I'd say they're probably not as soft on the rubber as the original ones are from Sony, but considering what we're working with, you can't really buy parts from manufacturers. You have to go through third-party sellers. I think these work out pretty gosh darn well. Just trying to line it back up on there and get it on. Doesn't want to go on. I think there's probably a defect on the holes here. There we go. Yeah, a little more difficult. But once they're on there, the rubber does still feel nice. It's kind of soft, just not as soft as the original one. And it still looks good. It's nice and smooth. So no big deal on that. We'll just go ahead and place this on the board, or on the back in the housing. Get some tweezers for the ribbon cable. When you're very careful when you're inserting this. This is the one of the original controllers, which is this one, the JDM001. I think JDM011 is the model that came out like right after that. Not 100% sure. This just has a latching slot right there, so it makes it a little bit easier. You just want to grab it, the little blue part on the ribbon cable with your tweezers, and then push it in very, very gently. Or what you can do is just start it so it's not in all the way. There you go. It's not in all the way. I've just started it and I'll push in it with my fingers. That way I don't risk damaging it with, dang it all the way. I don't risk damaging it with the tweezers, because I have, unfortunately, I have like tried to push it in and the tweezers are nice and pointy and sharp enough that they just go right through the ribbon cable. Once you do that, it's kind of over. So we're just gonna grab one more screw from the pile and screw the board back into the shell. I don't have my electric screwdriver with me right now because it was charging, and now I'm too lazy to get up and get it. Before I put the L2 and R2 on, I'll just put together the bottom board, and this usually goes in, the ribbon cable ends up folding in a specific way. So I'm just gonna eyeball it. If it bends down at 90 degrees, about an inch out first, and then it bends back on itself, maybe about that far, and then it bends out again 90 degrees, so it kind of forms a shape like that. Jam it back down in there into your hole where you're supposed to go. 2 more screws, the 2 small silver ones. So yeah, this is kind of a boring video because I was expecting it to be worse. Normally whenever I buy something that's already been opened by someone else, it's usually worse, and you can't see me what I'm doing right there. But so this is less of a trying to fix video and more of a showing you how to clean, restore, repair, or refurbish, whatever you want to call it, a PS4 controller. Which isn't too bad. You can kind of think of it as maybe if you buy some super cheap used controller from someone, it looks crappy because the analog sticks are all worn out and it's grubby, and maybe the L2 and R2 buttons aren't really feeling too tight. Yeah, this will kind of show you what you need to do in order to get it all cleaned up. Because once it's done and put back together, new analog sticks, nice and clean, and there's no stick drift or anything. Think of it as if you bought a controller for 20 bucks and then you only bought just new thumbsticks, it'd take you maybe, I don't know, 15 minutes of your time and around, I don't know, like $2 or $1.50 or something for a couple of new thumbsticks, depending on where you bought them from. I buy all my stuff from China because I usually keep a stock of things. So I can buy a bunch of things at once, keep it on hand, ready to go. So we're just gonna put the spring, oh wow, some stuff going on there. Putting the string in the L2 button and then slide it back into place here. There we go, nice and tight. You can't see it because it's rather difficult. There's a slot right here on either side towards the inside of the controller on this model of controller. And then the ribbon, I'm sorry, the spring is gonna slide into that slot. And that gives its little resting position and provides tension to the triggers. And we'll do the same thing for the R2. So I'm just gonna line up that spring into that little slot and then push it down, and it'll go right to where it needs to go. This one is kind of loose, which I've encountered a lot of controllers that have this kind of issue. The R2 specifically, because that's usually what's used for triggering on like FPS games, the R2 button gets kind of loose and starts popping out of its spot. So if you have a hot air rework station or hot air gun, it'll make things easier. If not, maybe I'm trying to think of a hairdryer. Turn it up, and you just want to focus it. There's kind of a tong towards the outside where my thumb is at. That's what we're going to try and heat up just for a few seconds. And you want to go at the side and really focus on just that tong, because you don't want to heat up anything else that's under it. And just slightly push it back in. Push it in towards the center. Put this back up. I can hit my camera. And that should fix that. It moved just a little bit. You don't need to do it a whole lot in order to get it nice and tight. Just a little bit. Line that spring up. Oh, it's not in place. Line the spring up. Push it down. Well, we might have gone a little bit, yeah, you might see just a little bit too tight. Now it's not really returning back to its starting position, which isn't bad. If you've gone a little bit overboard, it's a little bit easier to undo than trying to get it back and tight. So I'll just heat it up a little bit. And I think I got it. Just maybe a little bit more. Yep. Try that again. This doesn't happen too often, but it has happened on a number of the controllers that I've worked on. Usually just the R2. Not much of an issue on the L2 button, the L2 trigger. And there we go. Both of them feel nice and tight, and it's in its slots like it needs to be. Put the battery thing holder in place. As I said, just latches on the sides. And you'll kind of notice there's a hole here. It's supposed to have a little rubber piece that's used for the reset button. I have spares of these. I have, in my early days, I remember opening these up, and I would have this, and then I'd start working on it, and then it would disappear. So that's just a little rubber piece that goes in there, so that whenever you press the reset button, your, oops, there we go, the reset button for the hole in the back, so you're touching that little rubber piece, and then it goes to that button on the bottom. Put the battery in. And then line up the ribbon cable into the slot. Close it back up. Just a little bit tip whenever you're doing this, you always want to start from the back first. So I'm lining up the little grooves into between the R1 and R2, and then I'm gonna try and just pull it forward into its spot. And it knows where it wants to go. It wants to go back into its home, which is right there. And there we go. Like I said, there was no drift or anything on this, so I didn't really have anything to do except for just restoring it. But the screws were missing on this. So I've also got some replacement PS4 controller screws, little flat pan, or the flathead, not flathead, they're wafer screws, I think that's what they're called, where they're completely flat on the top. And I use to hold the controller together. Screwdriver, just grab it and then they go right in. You can see it's flashing right there, so you know it's put back together properly. So yeah, like I said, pretty easy video. I was expecting something a little bit more difficult. Fortunately though, I do have one more controller left in my drawers to fix. It's getting no power as well, and it doesn't look like it's been opened. So I'm expecting something a little bit more interesting on the inside. And if it's an old enough controller, I fixed a few PS4 controllers where the power management IC goes bad. And if it's an old enough one, then I'm gonna have some chips on their way in, or maybe I've got one spare board in my drawer. I'm not sure yet, but that'll be the one I work on next. This ribbon cable is just trash. I don't even want to deal with it. So there you go. I will connect this up to my computer just to make sure everything is working, but the L2 and R2 are nice and tight. I already knew all the buttons and everything working. There's no drift on there. So you can kind of see we went from analog sticks or thumbsticks that are all torn up and looking grubby and nasty to some nice clean ones and nice and fresh, as well as all of the dirt, grime, skin, crud in between the seams of the two halves, nice and clean. So this is definitely fixed up, clean, restored, whatever you want to call it. And that's kind of going to end it for the video. I don't want to keep rambling on or anything, so boring how to fix video, but hopefully it was interesting just to see what you can do to fix up a nasty looking controller and make it look a lot better than it was. So I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. Thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it was informational. You have a great rest of your night. Take care.